Because until we have the capacity as a society, like technologically, scientifically, to really alter the brain chemistry that causes these kinds of mental illnesses to manifest and like bring people back to a baseline not likely to commit murder, until we could do that, which we currently can't, there are going to be people who are too far gone. And in that way, you have to try your best to keep everybody else safe by not having them be in public. That's the difficulty. Like, this is complicated. There's no easy answer. Conservatives want the easy answer to be like, okay, kill them all. I think we as human beings have the capacity to not be that grug caveman about it and try to utilize the knowledge, the technology, the sociological understanding we have as a species, use those things, those tools to try to help these people. In so doing, by helping the worst elements of our society, we improve the lives of everybody else in our society as well. Oh, there's depressing news. Apparently, the teenagers who murdered Brianna Ghey were sentenced. I don't know exactly what the sentences are, rather. Partly motivated by 16-year-old victim's transgender identity, judge says. Damn. Shockingly premeditated. Brianna Ghey or Brianna J? Driving force behind the murder was sentenced a minimum of 22 years, 20 years. Damn. Good for them. I mean, like the judges who are sentencing. Good for the charges being that. You can't write name is pronounced J, rhymes with I. Your grasp on phonetics through text is leaving a bit to be desired. J as in jaywalking? Jai? Brianna Jai? Really? I've heard it like 18 different pronunciations, to be fair. Anyway, it's good that they were sentenced for that long, especially for being... How old were they? They're both 16. So by the time they get out of jail, if they live out, or if they serve the full extent of the sentence, they're going to be 36 and 38. Get fucked. Honestly, that's a little bit too good for them. But I mean, hopefully in that time, the criminal justice system and the restorative nature of it that we would hope for would be able to do its work and make these insane people able to be functioning members of society. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that. It is the UK. So we would imagine that they're like 0.1% better on criminal justice than the US is. Maybe that's charitable. Maybe it's like 0.07% better. Man, criminal justice is difficult. Shit ain't easy, all right? People go to school for this shit. Society is complex. That said, I mean, there's not really much to be said about it. I guess, like, does it talk about how they got this motivation? I'm reading a Guardian article right now. Like, the fact that it was incredibly premeditated and planned over the course of a year, apparently, is insane. And I don't know that we were aware of that before the trial. Ah, one of the killers was obsessed with serial killers, apparently. The horrors of true crime content and white women will never cease to depress. Apparently, one of the girl in this instance of those convicted, it's a guy and a girl. The girl in this instance tried to poison Brianna weeks before the murder with red ibuprofen tablets. And then subsequently, Brianna became ill, says her mother. Also, the killer, the girl in this instance, I don't care to say their names, by the way, which is why I'm being vague. Like, these are not names that need to be said. At this point, they're names that society needs to forget because there's no reason to give these people publicity, which is a difficult thing. We just always refocus on Brianna as the victim. The killers are not the important people here. It's important, obviously, that they are facing justice, but the victim is who's most important. And that's who any, I guess, popularity of name, it should go to. But yeah, apparently she had a kill list, and Brianna was one of the names on it. Jesus Christ. So the guy in this instance met Brianna for the first time on the day of the murder. While planning the killing, he repeatedly referred to her not as she, but it, and a femboy thing, and said he, quote, just wanted to see what size dick it has. Jesus Christ, man. Hey, man, this is what dehumanization does. Isn't that interesting? The dehumanization of people, of human beings whom you think are other and not normal. It's almost like that kind of rhetoric being popularized in society leads to profound negative consequences for the group being otherized and dehumanized. Shocking, really. Nobody could have expected this. Giving evidence, the guy insisted, so the male assailant insisted he was not transphobic. Yeah, man, I bet. Oh boy. An initial psychiatric assessment of the girl, the female assailant, suggested she had traits of autism and ADHD, but the psychiatrist changed his diagnosis post-conviction, saying she had, quote, a severe form of conduct dissocial disorder, one of the features of which is having no empathy. Yeah, man, I don't know many people with ADHD or autism that are doing this shit. So it seems like that even if she did have those things, I don't think that those were what drove her to do this. What do you think should happen to them? I'm pretty fine with the sentence they were given, 20 plus years. Hopefully the criminal justice system is able to do what it's ostensibly supposed to do and help them reform and no longer be psycho killers and be able to reintegrate back into society. But only time will tell. And I don't have high hopes, not because of the people in question here, though that does shake my conviction a bit, but also I don't have hopes in the criminal justice system being able to do that. But we'll see. I don't want them back in our society. Well, the ideal would be that they're 16 now. When they get out of jail, if they get out of prison, if they serve their full sentences, they will be both 36 and 38. At that point, hopefully, they've changed as people, you know? Because otherwise, like, anybody who does anything, like, what, do we just kill them? Do we lock them away forever? The goal is to hopefully have a criminal justice system that's able to reform people so that they do not commit these acts again. That's always been the ostensible goal of the criminal justice system. Yeah, of course, Valerie, but I mean, at the bare minimum, the 20 plus years they'll serve in prison will keep them out of the population. And that's the other part of why societies have prisons, is to keep people who are potentially a risk to others out of the public. Well, the ideal would be, Exol, that if it is determined that they are too far gone, then you gotta keep them out of public society somehow. It's pretty easy not to kill people. Yeah, for people who are, like, mentally sound, sure. I've never killed a person. I have no intention to, unless, like, I'm getting aggressed upon and it's self-defense. Then I might have to make that difficult choice for my own safety or the safety of my friends. But, like, if a person is quite literally mentally unwell, it's a bit of a different circumstance. And at that point, you gotta, one, get him out of public society, which this ruling, this conviction, has accomplished for 20 plus years. And then ideally try to find out why it is that their brain is this way and see if you can help them not be that way anymore. And then if it becomes the case that it is impossible to fix that, then you got to keep them out of public society for longer, I guess. Maybe not necessarily in prison, but like in an institution of some sort. Because until we have the capacity as a society, like technologically, scientifically, to really alter the brain chemistry that causes these kinds of mental illnesses to manifest and like bring people back to a baseline not likely to commit murder, until we could do that, which we currently can't, there are going to be people who are too far gone. And in that way, you have to try your best to keep everybody else safe by not having them be in public. That's the difficulty. Like, this shit is complicated. There's no easy answer. Conservatives want the easy answer to be like, okay, kill them all. I think we as human beings have the capacity to not be that grug caveman about it and try to utilize the knowledge, the technology, the sociological understanding we have as a species, use those things, those tools to try to help these people. And in so doing, by helping the worst elements of our society, we improve the lives of everybody else in our society as well. Not only in that you would help people no longer become a threat to others in society, but also a lot of, the things that we could learn from helping the worst elements of our society become better. Those things can then be used for other people who aren't like a direct threat to society, but are also struggling in their own ways with similar issues, like lack of empathy, for instance. It could be the case that this lack of empathy is like a brain chemistry thing, and that's going to be harder to solve. It's also possible that there's like a sociological fix for that. A lot of the lack of empathy that people have in our society is not a brain chemistry thing, but rather a learned behavior. It is not nature but nurture in that instance. Where if we as a society don't teach people how to empathize with other human beings, if we continue to other people, if we continue to, allow for bigotry to fester and for the atomization of our society to continue so that people are more and more sequestered from other people, especially people with differences that they can't understand, if that is allowed to continue, it'll only get worse. That's why a lot of these things happen. Like, generally speaking, people aren't going to go and shoot up schools with a sound mind. And in a society that has better mental health care and a more like positive approach to dealing with these social issues, you're going to have less people that are likely to do that. And you could look at other nations that have been able to have, like, come up with better criminal justice systems and healthcare systems that have been able to have better results. Not only that, they also have gun laws that make it so that firearm access is not as easy as the US. It's a different organism, the US, compared to a lot of other countries, considering how many guns are in this country. But even with, like, the knife crime and other shit like that, there are ways to make it better that we could see that exist in other countries. The biggest problem that we have right now is, one, Republicans and conservatism continuing the negative consequences of our society, be it people's lack of empathy, people's lack of resources, and the fact that they are not making enough money to pay their bills, their medical debt, their student loan debt, all these big problems causing people to have negative mental health care outcomes and also generally not be able to participate in society in a productive way. People's lack of meaning in life because the only thing they have time to do is work to pay the bills. They can't pursue any kind of extracurricular shit they actually want to do. The bigotry and whatnot that's allowed to continue to otherize other people, which just cuts away at people's empathy as well. The lack of access to mental health care and physical health care as well, that is continued purposefully by Republicans and Democrats at the behest of the pharmaceutical industry and the health insurance industry. There are so many problems that we could feasibly fix that would help all of the aforementioned problems that I mentioned here. But that's a difficult solution. Like, that's a difficult way to approach the problem. That requires a lot of work, and it's a lot of different areas that need to be worked on, so it requires a broader approach with a bunch of different people operating these moving parts. Whereas the solution, quote unquote, that conservatives and reactionaries will usually come up with, well, instead of all that, because that requires, you to think a little bit, and it requires you to have empathy for people, even the worst people in our society, and it requires you to look at different areas of like sociology and criminology and, the economic forces and all this kind of shit. It requires so much broad knowledge of a variety of different topics that a single person won't often have the time or care to actually fully comprehend. Well, I don't want to do all the difficult stuff, so why don't we just fucking kill him? Why not? And that's why they're pro the death penalty, because it's simple. And, it's possible that these people have an interest in seeing people get killed. Like, they might derive some kind of enjoyment or pleasure or reprieve from seeing bad people killed in the public square. And that in and of itself is a symptom of the problem we're trying to address here, that those kinds of capital punishment ways of thinking only exacerbate and make worse. Like, it's an easy, quote-unquote, fix to the problem, but it doesn't fix the problem, it just makes it worse. And that's not even to mention that it can be abused in a malicious capacity. If you make a variety of things punishable by death, it allows you to kill a whole bunch of people that, you've decided they are guilty of a capital punishment level crime. I seem to remember certain regimes of the past who decided that certain crimes were punishable by death and then killed a whole bunch of political opposition in order to do that. Or killed a whole bunch of people from a variety of minority groups, with the justification being the laws that they put in place that were actually unjust. So capital punishment can obviously be abused in that way. Also, to be in favor of capital punishment is to be in favor of the state murdering human beings who are innocent some percentage of the time. Because there's no way to be 100% certain that the person you're putting in the gallows is actually, liable for the crime. False convictions happen very often. Let's see. Percent of people on death row innocent, USA. Since 1973, at least 190 people have been exonerated from death row in the US, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. A 2014 study estimated that at least 4% of those sentenced to death are innocent. So, essentially, if you are pro-capital punishment, you are okay, you have to be necessarily okay with the state murdering the wrong person, an innocent person, 4% of the time. If that is something that you can morally justify in your own head, you gotta look inward. You gotta figure yourself out. Because at that point, you're not exactly the same as a murderer, but you're closer to one than I am, because I'm not okay with the state having the power to murder the wrong person or any person. But in this specific case, the wrong person 4% of the time. The only time I would support the state murdering a person is in the defense of this country. And even then, like, that's a difficult line to walk because you can see how that's abused by the United States military abroad, etc., who are not necessarily a threat to the physical safety of the citizens of the United States of America, but rather a threat to the economic prosperity of the corporations in America who would like to, have a bit of a hand in the natural resources of these countries that we invade. But in a vacuum, the ideal would be the only time the state has the ability to take the life of another human being is if they are threatening the safety and lives of citizens in this country, and I guess of our allies. Texas is murdering immigrants in the name of defense? Yeah, of course, and that's one obvious example of how that can be abused. It's difficult. It's why you need checks and balances. The Founding Fathers had an idea about that. They've had a lot of bad ideas, but, I think the idea that as a society we would have checks and balances on the power of the state is a pretty good thing. It may not shape up entirely the way that we would hope. Much of that is because of the fact that the Republicans, the conservatives in this country, have been slowly trying to weaken the checks and balances in this country so that they can just have a dictator in the presidency who can just rule because they were in favor of the monarchy should they be alive in the time of the Revolutionary War. I digress. Maybe the state shouldn't kill people, but maybe some people stay in prison for life. Yeah, like I'm obviously going to be more okay with lifetime sentences for like the most heinous of crimes than I am of capital punishment. But the ideal for this is going to be restorative and reformative justice so that you can help these people no longer become a threat to society, so that they pay the piper, as it were. They do their time for however long the judge has convicted them for. Obviously, this would be in line with like a whole bunch of study into criminal law and how long these sentences tend to need to be depending on the severity of the crime. And like in that time, they are separated from the public. The public is made safer, ostensibly, ideally, by them being in prison. And then while they are there, they are made to be subject to a variety of psychological exams and all this kind of stuff. And kind of like training and mental health related, exercises to make it so that should they get to the point where they can be released back into society and just be normal members of society again, they could be. Obviously, their life is irreparably changed from that point, obviously, and that was their own mistake and their own doing, and they're probably going to have a harder time in life because of that, if they do get out of jail eventually and don't recommit those crimes. Because their name is attached to it all, as well it should be. But, like, the ideal is that they don't hurt people again, or themselves again. Because, obviously, the main victim here, in this specific instance, is Brianna. But the assailants have also, like, essentially done self-harm in this instance. In terms of what I care about here, before we get into that conversation, I care about Brianna being the victim here at a percentage point of, like, 99.9999999999999%. Okay? But I do care 0.0000000000001% about the fact that the assailants, the convicted murderers in this instance, have also hurt themselves, and trying to make it so that they do not do that is probably a good thing, Probably a good thing. Because if we're able to find out concrete methods to stop murderers from murdering, that means we can apply those things to people before they've committed a murder. You know what I mean? Like, if you can help a convicted murderer no longer be a kind of person who is capable of committing murder, then you can help people that are would-be murderers have access to the tools to not then become actual murderers. And that makes everybody else in society safer who might be subject to being a murderee. In that instance, being the one who was murdered. And I think that's a good thing, because if we could stop murders before they happen, that's good. But a good way to learn how to do that would be to try to learn how to help a person who's already done a murder no longer be a person capable of doing a murder. Because it's going to be harder to do that than it is to help a would-be murderer. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap between how you help those people. Probably not one-to-one, but I'm sure there's some overlap there. And obviously, this is all in regard to, like, the criminal justice system. I've already talked about before about how I'm in favor of a variety of systemic changes to society that would make it so that the forces that push people to this kind of life of crime and like anti-human, alienated way of living and thinking. Like all of these systemic changes that I argue for would help that, would make it so that people would be less likely to be in a position to even think to commit that crime to begin with. Because like it is harmful to the person committing the crime, because once they do it, they get their liberty stripped away. That's supposed to be like the reason why people don't commit crime. It's like, oh yeah, don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time. Most of the people aren't going to do the crime because they don't want to do the time, actually, because they have things to care about in their life. A restriction of your liberty means you can't see your kids as often, means you can't see your loved ones as often, means you can't do your favorite hobbies as often, means you can't do your job if you're lucky enough to actually like it as often or at all anymore. And that should hopefully be a deterrent for most people to not then do the crime. It doesn't obviously work out like that in society, and part of that is because we don't give people anything to live for. Because our society is formatted in such a way that human beings don't become individual humans as part of a broader community that are there to help everybody and themselves be better people, but rather they are designed to be cogs in a machine to make money for wealthy CEOs and shareholders, and that existence leaves you nothing to give a shit about. Like, why would a person care about going to jail and losing all that liberty that they have if they've already lost their liberty before even committing that crime and being sentenced to jail? Like, the liberty that you lose from going to jail is one thing, but you've already lost your own individual liberty living in our society where you need money to pay the bills and you get paid dog shit for the work that you do. You're not exactly free if you have to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week just to keep the food on the table for yourself and your family and the lights on. That's not freedom. So at that point, what do you have to lose? You might as well do this crime or whatever. You might as well, allow for your worst impulses to take advantage of you, and for your negative mental health, the consequence of which is largely societal and systemic, to get the best of you, and then do that crime, because who the fuck cares? Like, my life's already over. I'm essentially already in a prison of some sort. At least in this other prison, I get 3 meals a day, theoretically, and a roof over my head. Like, there are so many problems that need to be addressed in this situation. And, like, I get that whenever heinous acts like this happen, people want, like, an eye for an eye. I get it. I'm sympathetic to that view. I've just been able to think about these issues in a different way, I guess, to the point where I understand that it would be better for society writ large if we could help people who've committed crimes like this become people who would not commit crimes like this, rather than just killing them or locking them up and throwing away the key and forgetting about them. Because that is an easy solution, and it might even, like, satiate that lizard brain part of you that, you got, like, when your brother punched you when you were a kid, well, you had to get a punch in back, or else you would not feel satisfied. You would feel wronged. I get it, but I don't think we should be operating on our lizard brain tendencies in that way. So, like, I would be fine with Brianna Ghey's killers to serve more than 20 plus years in prison. If they got a 50-year prison sentence, I would not shed a tear. Now, of course, they got 22 years minimum apiece. So by the time they get out of jail, should they serve the full sentence and it not get extended for whatever reason, they will be like 36 and 38. That's more than double the amount of life that they've had already. So in that time, hopefully, we're able to make them people who are no longer likely to commit a murder like this. And if we cannot, and if it's determined that they are going to be a continued threat to society, well, then you extend the sentence. Well, then you try to work harder to make these people not likely to commit murder again. And if you can't do that, then you can keep them in an institution somewhere until they die. But even then, they should be treated humanely. It's a difficult position to be in, man. To be a person capable of empathy, and to be a person that understands that this issue is multifaceted and there's so many different tendrils coming off of it in different fields of study and things that I can never fully understand and comprehend myself, and need to, like, deflect to, like, figures that have actually dedicated their life to understanding this shit. It's hard. It's not easy. I get it. I'm struggling over here myself. I don't know if this is the correct solution. I just have a high percentage chance likelihood that I've figured out in my head the calculus in my own brain that makes it seem like this is the best path forward. And the way we've been doing things is not that great. Society is a fuck, all right? And unfortunately, you live in one. So we're going to have to figure something out. Also, it should be said that there has not yet been a way found to kill somebody by the state in a way that isn't like barbaric. Even the lethal injection is sometimes worse than literal hanging in terms of like the devastation and barbarity inflicted upon the person. Now, obviously, if you're in favor of capital punishment, you're not going to care about that. But if you do understand that, if you're not okay with the state having the authority to murder a human being who is innocent 4% of the time, which I'm not, then you're going to have to grapple with the idea that you're going to be absolutely brutalizing a person until, they die who is innocent 4% of the time. I'm not okay with that. So it's like, something's got to be done here. I'm not even in favor of the state murdering someone who is guilty. Yeah, same. The only time, like I say, I'm okay with the state murdering somebody is if it's explicitly in the case of, let's say that Canada drops paratroopers into Minnesota and starts lighting everybody up. Well, then, yeah, the state through the military should have the ability to murder the soldiers there that are currently gunning down Minnesotans. Then I'm okay with it. But, like, that's not often happening. I don't know that Snow Mexico to our north is trying to do that. You know what I mean? And often that justification is used in malicious ways vis-a-vis the war on terror and regime change shit we've done in Latin, America. It ain't good, bro. Alabama recently did the first nitrogen gas state execution. Seems like the most humane way to do it. That's what you'd think, man. Yeah, you say most humane because it's not humane. We're just trying to get close to actually being humane. The idea that you could ever humanely murder a human being is already like it's an oxymoron. We've been trying to fit that triangle-shaped piece into the thin line hole for a long time. Maybe one day we're able to figure out that paradox. But anyway, watch the Jacob Geller video on it because it's really good. Jacob Geller, 9 months ago, the false evolution of execution methods. Also, coincidentally, Jacob Geller has a lot of really good videos on video games, if that's something you're interested in. I am, so that's also good. It's a really good video. ACLU article on how bad the nitrogen gas thing is. Oh boy. Alabama has executed a man with nitrogen gas despite jury's life verdict. UN experts say the method constitutes torture, violating international human rights treaties ratified by the U.S. On January 25th, the state of Alabama executed Kenneth Smith using nitrogen hypoxia, subjecting him to inhale pure nitrogen through a mask until he suffocated. Despite state claims that it would be a painless death, witnesses reported Mr. Smith shook, convulsed, writhed, then gasped for minutes until he was pronounced dead at least 22 minutes after the execution began, though just how long it took is unknown since Alabama closed the execution curtain before the official time of death. Maybe they thought it would be a little faster. It's almost like this is never going to work. There's never going to be a so-called humane way to end the life of another human being. And maybe we should try to find solutions that don't involve ending the life of another human being. Like, I don't know, trying to make them so that they don't commit the crimes that they're committing anymore through harder things like fucking mental health care shit, bruh. In Switzerland, we're going to have nitrogen suicide pods. Well, at that point, theoretically, it's the person who is having it done to them is doing it with their own consent. Like, if it's voluntary euthanasia, it's still not good. Don't get me wrong. Like, we should be trying to make it so that people don't want to do that. Because, like, theoretically, people should be in a position where they want to be alive. Like, that should be goal number one. But, at least it's with the consent of the person doing it. And I would imagine you have to go through a lot of psychiatric evaluation to get to the point where, like, the state's like, okay, you can kill yourself. And even then, like, the amount of people who would qualify for being allowed to kill themselves would be pretty low. Like, if you have a life-threatening disease that will kill you and there's no way around it, I would imagine those people would be given the most consideration. Like, hey, you have a very painful condition that cannot possibly be solved by current technological methods, and you're tired of trying to fight it because you have been for like 20 years and you know the date is coming up. Why not go out on your own terms? Then, I can understand it. If it becomes the case that, like, you are having trouble romancing women and you're very depressed because of that, and also you have ADHD, so it's hard for you to better yourself to the point where you might have more success with women, I don't think you should then be allowed to kill yourself using the state. I don't think you should kill yourself ever, frankly. I know that might be a hot take. It might be, I just give the hard truths on this program. So, suicide, not good, actually, I think. The Swiss voluntary euthanasia thing is for cases of terminal, very painful illnesses that have no solution, pretty much. Yeah, like, that makes sense to me. I thought nitrogen asphyxiation was painless. That's the hope, but it never seems to be the case, does it? Watch the Jacob Geller video. Like, I happen to realize that the greatest advocates for voluntary euthanasia are not often the people with the painful, uncurable disease that want to go out on their own terms because they're going to die anyway and they don't want to be in pain anymore. They want to go out with dignity. And often they are people who are depressed and suicidal already and just want a clean way to do it. And I don't think at that point suicide should be the choice there. You should be trying to get ways to not be suicidal anymore and have a better life. And obviously, that's hard to do on your own. So we're going to have to find a societal solution for that. The ideal being comprehensive and easy access to mental health care, physical health care, a better quality of life, higher wages, more free time, etc. So many things that I already advocate for to make the state of our world and society better. And that's hard to do. And I understand that that's part of the reason why a lot of people are like looking for an easy way out. Not to say that the decision to take your own life is an easy one, but it is certainly a quicker solution, I suppose, than the amount of effort that would have to be put into not doing that and doing the things required to shape society in such a way that you are not in that position. And then to also shape your own mind and life into a position through the things that you can change that you do not want to do it either. So it's hard. Shit's not easy. Now, if you were given options for the euthanasia, one of which was getting launched into the vacuum of space by your own consent, or like tossed into a volcano, I'm a little bit more, willing to be lenient on that. Because at least that's a cool way to go. I'm just kidding. I've always said that when I perish, hopefully at the great age of 500 years old, that I want to be, obviously, my organs donated because whoever gets these organs is going to be like superhuman. Because if they don't have the negative detriments that I have that keep me from being superhuman currently, but then they get my organs and they don't have those detriments, they're going to be nuts. It's going to shake the fabric of the world. I'm going to donate my organs and then be cremated and then have my ashes shot into space so I can become one with the universe in that way. I already am one with the universe, but you know what I mean. Posthumously. I think that'd be pretty cool. I'm going to be cremated, then donate my organs? True. Creamed corn, you're so true. Cremated, man. Anyway, life is a fuck. Life's a bitch and then you die. So my aunt used to say. She still says it, but she used to too. And you know what? That's true. But what's missing in there, and it's the subtext that you don't readily see or hear, is life's a bitch and then you die, but you try to make the most of it for yourself and the people you love, both directly love through loved ones, friends and family, but also every other human being on earth, because I got love for everybody. Feel me? Anyway.